Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this League of Women Voters Forum for candidates running for Norfolk County Sheriff. I'm Sharon Fradkin of the League of Women Voters of Sharon-Stoughton. This forum is co-hosted by the leagues in Norfolk County, Sharon-Stoughton, Brookline, Needham, Norwood, Wellesley, and Westwood Walpole-Dedham. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan, multi-issue organization that encourages informed, active participation of citizens in government. The League does not support or oppose candidates or political parties. No League members involved in this forum, including the planners, moderator, question monitor, and timekeeper, are endorsing either of these candidates. Because of the COVID-19 pandemic, we are holding this forum as a Zoom webinar. Within this format, we are doing our best to emulate a live forum. We are also subject to possible technical glitches, as we've just experienced. And we ask that you bear with us and understand that the candidates may experience sound or screen issues totally beyond their or our control. A little bit about the county. Norfolk County is made up of 28 communities and is one of 14 counties in the state. It is the fourth most populous county per the 2010 census, with over 670,000 people, and is the only non-contiguous county, with Brookline and Cohasset separated by water or other municipalities. In Massachusetts, sheriffs are elected within the 14 counties every 6 years. But this year, Norfolk County is electing its sheriff for only a 2-year term because of a vacancy that occurred midterm in 2018. The governor appointed the current sheriff, Jerry Mcdermott, but the law requires the sheriff be elected at the next state election. Norfolk County Register of Probate Pat Mcdermott won the Democratic primary for sheriff and is facing the Republican winner, Jerry Mcdermott. The role of the Norfolk County Sheriff. We will learn more about this from the candidates, but for a baseline, the Norfolk County Sheriff is a state office within the Department of Corrections, elected by the voters of Norfolk County. The principal responsibility is management and operation of the Norfolk County House of Correction in Dedham, where the inmate population has ranged from 400 to 700, but fewer during the pandemic, and sentences are generally not more than 2.5 years. The other area the Sheriff's Office oversees, separate from the House of Correction, is civil process. The majority of process service is delivery of legal notices where mail alone notice is not considered sufficient, such as serving subpoenas and following up on failures to appear in court. The Sheriff's Office has approximately 350 employees and an annual budget in the range of $35 million. Today, we will hear from the two candidates seeking this office for the 2-year term. Our moderator today is Vedna Hayward. She is a board member of the League of Women Voters of Plymouth, which is not in Norfolk County specifically, and a board member of the League of Women Voters of Massachusetts. Vedna will lead us through the forum. Welcome, Vedna.
Thank you, Sharon. The candidates have been fully apprised of the format and the ground rules. For the benefit of the audience, I will give an overview. Each candidate will have a 60-second introduction in ballot order. I will then ask them questions in random order. Each candidate will answer all the questions. The response time for questions is 90 seconds. 60-second rebuttals may be allowed if deemed appropriate by the moderator. The questions come from a variety of sources, prepared in advance by the League of Women Voters, collected in advance from the public via email, and from our live Zoom audience. During the event, the Zoom audience may use the Q&A box at the bottom or top of your screen, depending on the device that you are using to view the forum. You can ask a question at any time in the Q&A box. We will ask at least 2 questions from the Zoom audience. A League member is responsible for monitoring these questions and will pass them on to me, and they may be a combined several questions on the same topic to form a composite question. We will finish with a 90-second closing statement in reverse ballot order. We will start with the opening statements from each candidate. As you all have noticed by now, both candidates have the same last name, so we'll be addressing them by their preferred first name. Jerry, please introduce yourself and remember to unmute. You have 1 minute.
Thank you, Vedna, and thank the League of Women Voters for putting together this forum, and thank my opponent, Pat Mcdermott, for joining us this evening. My name is Jerry Mcdermott, and I am your sheriff. I was appointed 22 months ago by Governor Charlie Baker. I'm a single dad raising two amazing daughters, Ashley and Lori. We reside in Westwood. In the almost 2 years now that I've been your sheriff, we've saved 23 lives through the Are You OK program for senior citizens. I've successfully launched the MAT, Medication Assisted Treatment Program, for those battling addiction. I ended the long, unfair practice of sending justice-involved women to MCI Framingham, and I brought them back to a county level where they can get the same rehabilitative services as the men. And I've also created a task force on juvenile mental health and substance use disorder. We've made a lot of great progress in the last 22 months, and I'm certainly looking forward to discussing some of the great news with the voters here tonight. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Jerry. Pat, your opening statement, please.
Thank you to League of Women Voters. Good evening. My name is Patrick Mcdermott. I'm from the city of Quincy, where I live with my wife, attorney Tracy Wilson, and two teenage children, Alana, who will be a first-time voter in November, and Adam. I am the graduate of St. Paul's Choir School in Cambridge, Boston College High School, Boston College, Suffolk University Law School. I'm a former aide at the Massachusetts House and Senate. I'm an attorney and a former prosecutor. I'm a former Quincy City Councilor, a 16-year Massachusetts Democratic State Committee man, and for the last 18 years, I've served as your Register of Probate. The Norfolk County Sheriff's Office has the opportunity and the responsibility to become a resource for all the residents of Norfolk County. In this unprecedented time to our risk of health, safety, and well-being, I believe that the Sheriff's Office must do more to change how we think about public safety in Norfolk County. I'm looking forward to sharing my vision about how the Sheriff's Office must evolve beyond the jail to better serve the people of Norfolk County tonight.
Thank you very much, Pat. This brings us to the questions. For the questions, you will have 90 seconds to respond. We'll start with you, Pat. If elected, what would be your 3 top priorities for the next 2 years?
Just try to get unmuted there real quick. So what we need to do for specific solutions, basically at the Norfolk County Sheriff's Office, we must make sure that we do a stem to stern review of the current programs and staffing. We need innovative and cutting edge approaches to addressing mental health, homelessness, substance abuse, domestic violence, and criminal behavior. We need to partner with nonprofits, faith-based institutions, and governmental programs. I'll make sure that our focus is going to be on the reduction of recidivism. And the only way we can do that is by bringing metrics into our system. That's data entry to make sure that folks aren't participating in the revolving door that has become the Norfolk County Sheriff's Office. We need to focus on youth. And one of the biggest programs I will do is focus on first-time offenders, our juvenile units from 18 to 34 years old. We want to make sure that we have a separate unit for those first-time offenders. And at the end of the day, we really got to come up with our theme here. And the theme of running the Sheriff's Office needs to be prevention, intervention, education, and hope. And surrounding those things, we're going to make sure that we have a Norfolk County Sheriff's Office that has proper control of our budget, proper programs for rehabilitation and reentry, and develop hardcore community partnerships that will lead us in the area of public safety.
Thank you very much, Pat. Jerry, would you like me to repeat the question, or?
No, I've got it, Vedna. Thank you very much. And I like what my opponent, challenger Pat, had to say. We've actually done all of those things in the 22 months that I've been there. I did a stem to stern review as soon as I got there, and I called in an outside auditor. Not many sheriffs want to call in an auditor on themselves, but I called up Democrat Suzanne Bump's office, and I said, the first thing I want is a review of all the process and procedures at the Civil Process Office in Quincy. Before I took over, people down there were writing checks for $500,000 with no checks and balances. I changed that so that no one writes a check out of the Civil Process Division for over $500 without 2 people signing off on it. We made public the results of that audit because I believe in transparency. That's been the hallmark of my tenure so far as the Sheriff of Norfolk County. The programs that we've already started would be my priorities. That was a question, Vedna, what would we do going forward? And it certainly would be a continuation of the task force on juvenile mental health and substance use, getting out to the schools as I was doing before COVID-19 hit, and making sure that our young people don't take up alcohol and drug use and go down the wrong path. And we've got a great program in store for them. as well as for our females involved with the justice system. Many of them are the victims themselves of being battered. And when they find themselves involved with the courts, I don't want to see any female incarcerated. And we've got a great program, which I'll talk about a little bit later, how we're going to have them just on ankle bracelets and staying at the McGrath House.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jerry. Okay, for the next question, we will start with you, Jerry. Please describe the inmates, types of crimes, and lengths of sentences at Norfolk County House of Correction. What steps could the Sheriff's Department take to help decrease the criminal activity and incarceration?
It's a great question. So it runs the gamut. I have doctors and lawyers that are locked up. Sadly, we've had some high-profile cases involving domestic violence. We had a doctor from Dover that was alleged to have murdered his wife. During the stay-at-home advisories and this global pandemic, we've seen people with mental health issues and people that are victims of domestic violence. We've seen a spike in that. We've also seen some low-level crimes, people whose really their biggest crime is hurting themselves. Their underlying mental health issues and substance use disorder have led them down a path of battling alcoholism or addiction to painkillers. And those are typically the types of people we see. Close to 80% of the men and women in our care and custody right now have a dual diagnosis. What we can do to stem that is the intervention and education early on. And working with the courts, as I'm doing now, I just recently reached out to Judge Coven. We're going to have a program that will send females involved in the justice system, many of whom are moms. We're going to have them go to the McGrath House, and we'll monitor them on the ankle bracelet. And a little bit later, I know we're tight on time, but I want to get into a program we're going to have at the pre-release center in Dedham, where we're actually going to have mom and child stay-over visits to work on successful family reunification. And that will break the vicious cycle within so many families. It'll stop that dysfunction, and we'll partner with big brothers and big sisters to mentor those young people whose mom or dad may be incarcerated.
Thank you very much, Jerry. Pat, I can repeat the question.
Yeah, if you could, babe, please.
Okay, so please describe the inmates, types of crimes, and lengths of sentences at the Norfolk County House of Correction. What steps could the Sheriff's Department take to help decrease criminal activity and incarceration?
So there are three types of prisoners that are currently at House of Correction. First and foremost is criminals who are convicted up to serve 2.5 years in the House of Correction. There are also pretrial detainees that are waiting for more serious crimes to be tried, as well as there are federal detainees also waiting for federal criminal trials. But at the end of the day, this is about my theme: prevention and intervention, education and hope. I believe that the Sheriff's Office can and must evolve beyond the jail to better serve the people in Norfolk County. It's critical that we have a jail that's run efficiently and effectively and safely for inmates and employees alike. But public safety is more than putting people in jail. It has to be, and we all know it. The Sheriff's Office can and should be part of the answer, leading the county and coordinating responses to natural and public health crises. For example, the Sheriff's Office has the capability to serve as a resource when our county is in crisis, as it is during the COVID-19 pandemic. As Sheriff, I want to shift the focus of the office from simply managing a correctional facility to one of serving as the county's chief public safety officer. And part of that means reimagining what public safety means. As your sheriff, I see public safety as more than just putting criminals behind bars. I see it more as a holistic approach. In my view, housing insecurity is a public safety issue, food insecurity is a public safety issue, underemployment and unemployment are public safety issues, and racism is a public safety issue. These are the things we need to work on to help prevent criminals from recidivating.
Thank you, Pat. Jerry, would you like to rebut?
Yeah, just a quick rebuttal, if I may, Vedna. Thank you. So with regard to COVID-19, a global pandemic, no one saw that coming, but we had the foresight to prepare with these electrostatic guns. They're misting guns that can sanitize and kill 99.9% of the germs. So I've led, as your Norfolk County Sheriff, whenever we needed to partner with the 28 communities, we went out to the district courts, the district attorney's office, all 28 police departments, and sanitized their lobbies, their holding cells, the fleet of cruisers, so that we could stop the spread of this virus. And when there is an emergency, we are already partnered. We're part of MetroLec, but we also have the best trained SRT, Sheriff's Response Team, so that when we are called upon, we can go out and assist. We have a mobile command center that I've invested money that had been out of the MetroLec pool for a number of years, but I've invested in the technology and we're called upon all the time. For example, if there's a shooting at the Braintree Mall, we're dispatched immediately. So we are that resource countywide now.
Thank you, Jerry. Pat, you also, you have an opportunity to rebut as well, up to 1 minute.
Well, the only thing I have to say right now is that there is no plan right now at the Norfolk County Sheriff's Office. And that's all fine and good if you have specialty equipment that you'd like to lend out to people across the county, and that's great. But when there's no emergency plan put in place for the men and women who work at the jail and those men that are serving time at the jail, that's unfortunate. It's my understanding that there is no emergency response plan in place if COVID-19 breaks out, just like it did in Essex County. First thing I did is register a probate when this hit, is we immediately activated an emergency response plan that was typically for snow emergencies or when the court was going to be closed for any long period of time. But this became a real public health crisis. And we implemented an immediate COVID-19 emergency response plan to make sure that our employees, our litigants, are all healthy, and that's the way we had to work. There is no plan right now, and I think that unfortunately, if one were to break out, we'd have a real tough time at the Norfolk County Sheriff's Office.
Okay, I just want to state, we only do the rebuttals once. I can go on to the next question, which is a little bit similar. Okay, so that brings us to our next question, starting with Pat. What percentage of inmates are repeat offenders, and what are some of the issues that lead to repeat incarceration? If elected, how would you ensure that those who are released have the best chance for a successful reentry into their communities and avoid repeat incarceration?
So right now, unfortunately, once again, there are random studies that talk about recidivism. We estimate anywhere from 30 to 40% recidivism rate when it comes to the county facilities. That's unacceptable, and I think that we can do a lot to prevent that from happening. The key is, when I talk about corrections, we have to correct behavior, but rehabilitation is something that has to be conquered at the jail itself. The average inmate is only serving about 45 days in the House of Correction. So I think the focus always has to be on reentry, making sure that the inmates themselves, who most oftentimes are having addiction issues and also mental health issues, we need to identify where those community resources are, that we can make sure that all of the issues are addressed that they have. I mean, most of the problems that we're seeing, the repeat crimes, are based on housing issues, job issues, training issues, education issues. We need to partner up with our nonprofits and our faith-based communities to make sure that there are proper landing pads for these inmates when they go back out into the communities of Norfolk County. I have partnerships. I've been endorsed by numerous labor unions who have all pledged to me that they would be willing to work with inmates out in the public to help them keep and maintain a job. Education. We have great community schools throughout Norfolk County. We'll make sure that the inmates have the education that they need on the outside to have success in the long run so that they don't have that recidivism rate. Housing, healthcare, mental health counseling, education, job.
Thank you, Pat. I will repeat the question for you, Jerry. What percentage of the inmates are repeat offenders, and what are some of the issues that lead to repeat incarceration? If elected, how would you ensure that those who are released have the best chance for successful reentry into their communities and avoid repeat incarceration?
Thanks, Vedna. And we are doing some great programming. I believe that good corrections happens through good programming. We have a robust menu of different options that inmates can sharpen their skills. I've talked to Steve Tolman from the AFL-CIO. We've talked to all the labor unions. We have great programs in place, including an organic gardening program. We're going to have a hardscaping program, which is much like a landscaping program. We have a culinary arts program, and we have to meet each inmate where he or she is on their education level. 90% of our inmates pass their high school equivalency, 90% at the first try. So we're doing everything we can for successful reentry. The recidivism rate is stubborn. It's hovering anywhere between 30 to 45%, depending on who you talk to. And we're better than the Department of Corrections and better than some of the other counties our size. We're going to continue to drive that down. But the main reason for recidivism is relapse. It's people that pick up again and use, and it is their underlying mental health issues and substance use disorder, which we as a community have to tackle. And when somebody leaves our care and custody, after we've taken great care to get them clean and sober and get them on their way with a skill set so they can be a productive member of society, we don't just say goodbye. We have a warm handoff, and I call that the Continuum of Care. And we work with many partners to make sure that they're successful on the outside and can make it so that we don't have them continuing to commit crime to feed their addiction.
Thank you very much, Jerry. For the next question, Jerry, you'll go first. What programs would you implement in the area of healthcare, including the treatment of mental health and substance abuse disorders?
Vedna, that's an excellent question. When I became sheriff 22 months ago, I was one of 7 county sheriffs that embarked on a very ambitious pilot program called MAT, Medication Assisted Treatment. Many of the officers that work up there were dead set against it, and there wasn't a lot of buy-in. So we had to work with our own staff that were very set in their ways, many of them, and explain, we're not trading off one drug for another, as some of them thought. We are saving people's lives, and we're putting people on methadone, Suboxone, or some of them are going completely cold turkey and working with Vivitrol, which is excellent for whether you're battling alcoholism or you're addicted to heroin. So it's not just giving out dispensing medication, it's programming, it's counseling, and the inmates have to partake in this program. And by tackling that, we're really getting at the root cause of why these people are abusing substances and why they're committing crimes. And a key piece of this is not just to lower recidivism, but if we can help heal that broken person and we can get them clean and sober, you're saving that person's life, you're saving that family, and then the neighborhood and the community where that person's going back to is going to be that much. And that's really the way I look at public safety in a much broader perspective, because 97% of the men and women that are incarcerated right now will get out. They're all going to get out at some point, but 97% go right back to the community in Norfolk County from which they came. So that's why I feel it's incumbent upon me as your sheriff to make sure we have that robust programming and address mental health issues.
Thank you very much, Jerry. Pat, I'll repeat the question. What programs would you implement in the area of healthcare, including treatment of mental health and substance abuse disorders?
So we need a robust plan, not just inside the jail, but outside the jail for all our communities in Norfolk County. I think the sheriff has to take a lead role, not just on the inmate population, but like I said, prevention right at the front, working with youth groups to make sure that they don't go down the wrong path when it comes to drug addiction. When it comes to intervention, I think we have many opportunities prior to incarceration, because that's the goal, is keep incarceration low with diversion programs. I'll use my relationships with the trial court, working with our district courts, our probate courts, our drug courts, veterans courts, and our mental health and housing courts to really identify the issues that people are dealing with and how we can keep them from having to come into the jail in the first place. We'll work with the community and faith-based organizations. I've worked in the nonprofit field for quite a while. I've served in numerous leadership capacities and have partnerships around Norfolk County in the areas of healthcare as well as mental health counseling. I think we have to make sure that those partnerships are in place and that they're ready to accept our clients when they come out of the prison facility. The biggest issue affecting our inmates when they leave is healthcare issues. They don't have access to quality healthcare. We got to make sure that, whether it's the Affordable Care Act, make sure that's fully funded out of Washington. But we got to make sure that addiction and mental health care are vitally important. Employment, housing, and other services must be available on the outside. And those are the partnerships I already have in place through the leadership positions I've already held.
Thank you, Pat. Jerry, you care to rebut?
Just a quick rebuttal. Most of what Pat is saying, and I'm not going to disagree with it, we're already doing it. With all due respect, everything that's been said so far this evening, we're already doing. And when I talk about a continuum of care, when somebody leaves our care and custody, they don't just walk out the door. We don't just say good luck and goodbye. We make sure they have a roof over their head. We make sure they are on Mass Health. We make sure they know where their AA or their NA, Narcotics Anonymous or Alcoholics Anonymous meetings are. They know exactly where they're going to live. We try very hard with family reunification, but if not, they'll be in a sober home. But they're going to have a job if they're any way employable. And before COVID hit, we had so many of our men and women being sought after. I actually had a restaurateur from Weymouth who said, I want to come up and do a culinary arts program and partner with you. And we already have a great culinary arts program, but he wanted to come up and work with our guys and basically select the best chefs to go work at his restaurant. So people don't just walk out our door. We have a continuum of care. It's a warm handoff so that they will be successful, and that will lower crime.
Thank you, Jerry. Pat, do you care to rebut? Do you have
I'll just say basically, it's great all these programs are on paper and we can govern by press release and we can govern by gimmick, or we can get some hardcore statistics. There are no hardcore statistics that show any of our programs that are currently in place You know, Sheriff Bellotti put most of these plans in place for 20 years. It's easy to carry the ball, but until we get a handle on the statistics, and I've talked to the district attorney, he has watched many of the people over the last 2 years coming back through the court system and going back to the jail. COVID-19 came and we released a lot of prisoners from the jail, but now those folks are coming back in. We're watching an uptick back with our prison population. And that's basically a failure to lead. We don't know if these programs are working or not. That's why we need the review of the programs. We need metrics to be put in place. And I'm the one to be able to do it because I've already done it in my
We have that.
past careers.
We have that. He's misspoken. We have it.
I'll go on to our next question. This question comes from our live Zoom audience. We will start with the question is, what is currently being done and what will you do in the future to ensure that all incarcerated citizens who maintain the right to vote have meaningful access to the ballot, including access to absentee applications, stamps, candidate info, deadline information, and the like?
Yeah, the right to vote is the most fundamental thing in our society. And I think that when you provide education to our inmate population, when you provide for them goals and opportunities, the best thing to do is educate them on civics and to be able to provide them to make sure that they have the right to vote in all elections. I have great relationships around the county with all our county clerks. I would definitely make sure that we have access to voter registration opportunities. I would make sure that we have access with the Secretary of State's office with the various voter profiles. If an inmate is incarcerated, we have to make sure that we do a robust absentee voting registration plan for the inmates there. So those are all things. Access to the ballot is fundamental, and I would never take that away from somebody who's serving at the House of Correction.
Thank you very much, Pat. Would you like me to repeat the question, Jerry?
No, that's okay, Vedner, I've got it. It's about voting for folks while they're incarcerated.
Absolutely.
The timing is perfect for this question. We're actually doing it. We've got flyers up all over the jail and House of Correction. We're working with our caseworkers to make sure that everybody can avail themselves. And we're encouraging people, if they're eligible, to register to vote before the deadline. And we'll make sure that those ballots get into the hands of those in our care and custody and that they cast their vote. They have every right to do so. And unless they're a felon, depending on the felony, and that's information the Secretary of State Galvin's office has. Yep, we're encouraging everybody to do their civic duty.
Thank you very much, Jerry. I will go on to the next question. We will start with you, Jerry. It was stated in the introduction that the current budget of the Sheriff's Office is around $35 million. What are the budgetary implications of implementing any new initiatives you propose?
So Ben, let me start. When I took over 22 months ago, I inherited almost $6 million in red ink. There was a deficit of about $5.5+ million. Through some savings and not backfilling positions, we have really cut down that. We ended this past year, this past fiscal year, in the black. And depending on how you slice the numbers, that's the first time, I'll use a conservative number, it's the first time it's been done in 7 years. My CFO says closer to 11 years. And I'm not blaming my predecessor, Mike Bellotti. All the sheriffs have suffered a structural deficit because Beacon Hill doesn't fund them at the levels they need for the new vision that we're all proposing here tonight. We're doing so much more than just feeding inmates and letting them sit there during their time, during their sentence. We have robust programming. We're trying to help people with mental illness and substance use disorder. I use metrics-based management for everything. So we're measuring what works and what doesn't work. So going forward, we're going to reallocate funds towards programs that have proven success and proven results. But I can tell you one thing on the numbers. I will put forward my numbers with transparency and let any sheriff or any challenger or any media see what we've done. From last November till now, I've shaved $2 million in savings from positions. That's FTEs and not backfilling positions and through attrition. That's a pretty good successful record that I'll stand on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jerry. Would you like me to repeat the question, Pat?
No, it's a budget issue. And the bottom line is the Sheriff's Office have been level funded for the most part for the last umpteen years. And there's always been a fight on Beacon Hill about supplemental appropriations. There are structural deficits that are in place. I disagree with the acting sheriff about whether or not he's actually balanced the budget. I mean, we've been under a COVID-19 problem. We haven't even closed the books on fiscal year 20, and we don't even have a budget for fiscal year 21 yet. So according to the Speaker of the House, we're looking at possibly a $4 to $6 billion budget deficit in the Commonwealth. So moving forward, I think we're trying to be prospectively. I'd say I will tell a cautionary tale. I've been through ups and downs in the budget over the course of my tenure as Register of Probate and formerly as a city councilor in Quincy. I know when it's time to make the hard decisions that are necessary on making the budgetary program work. And I think in the COVID-19, it's been kind of, you hadn't had a choice when it came to the stats going down. I'm kind of baffled only because I know that most of the administration at the jail was in fact backfilled under the new administration. And then I believe 2 classes were put on as corrections officers. So when the inmate population has gone down. So I'd love to take a look at those numbers and see where it is. Deval Patrick used to call it a fiscal shell game. I'll call it what it is today, fiscal shell game.
Would you care to rebut,
I
Jerry?
sure would, Vedna. I sure would, yeah. So I had to put on 2 classes because we have people that are retiring all the time. And when you're sheriff, you have to make sure that you have appropriate staffing levels to run a safe and secure facility. And that's job number 1. So we've done that. And by the way, the 2 classes that my opponent mentions, the most diverse in close to 20 years, the most women, the most people of color, 7 different languages spoken. And they're there for the long term because so many people either retire that are officers or they leave for bigger police departments. As far as the numbers go, it wasn't magic, and it wasn't just COVID-19. And yes, we had some forced furloughs, but I deferred. If we didn't need Harley-Davidson motorcycles, for example, we put that off. If we could make do with the transportation vans that we have, that's what we did. We worked with our mechanics and made sure that the older vehicles in our fleet were up to par and that they were good enough for right now. When better times come, sure, we'll spend accordingly. But for my opponent to level a charge that it's some kind of shell game, that's just disingenuous. It's misleading the voters, and the D next to his name should be for deceitful because that's what he's been so far this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jerry. Pat, do you care to rebut? You have up to a minute.
Yeah, at the end of the day, that's unfortunate that he goes down that road. I mean, the bottom line is there has been no transparency in this office since the acting sheriff has taken over. We get issues relative. I mean, you get federal detainees coming in, so he's taking money from the federal government in order to supplement his budget. He's taking money from inmates who have to make phone calls to their loved ones. That's a contract that he's honored there. I'd get rid of that. And plus, the first thing he did when he got into office, I don't know what the priorities were, but he bought 2 horses, I think, to try to make some kind of mounted unit at the jail.
That's a lie. That's a straight out lie.
I don't understand what
that's
that was all
false,
about.
bold-faced lie. You
Okay.
should retract, Pat, you should retract that because you'll be embarrassed in the press tomorrow for saying we purchased horses.
Okay.
You know we didn't do that. So you want to take that back?
Looks as though there were horses marching in the parade right next to you back in Flag Day.
I'm just.
You just made the accusation we purchased horses, which shows you don't know anything about the budget, and it's been completely transparent from day 1.
Right. So I'm just going to remind you too that this isn't a debate, it is a forum. And so we do have opportunities to rebut and to just maintain some type of civility during this forum. Thank you. I will go on to the next question. This is question, we will start off with you, Pat. How has the pandemic changed your view of practices in the Sheriff's Department and the House of Correction? And how will it impact practices post-pandemic?
So COVID-19 basically, a public health crisis requires us to take extraordinary precautions with our staff and our inmate population. COVID-19 doesn't discriminate either inside or outside the House of Correction. You got to make sure you maintain correct staffing levels during a healthcare crisis. I think they're dealing with a big problem up in Essex County right now. Like I said, there really isn't an emergency response plan in place right now, so it's kind of make it up as you go. Access to quality healthcare is what you need to make sure that inmates have the quality healthcare that they need. Part of keeping people in the House of Correction safe is making sure that everyone in the county is safe. Public health awareness programs, hygiene programs. We need an expanded vision of public health as it relates to public safety. One of the things that I would do is make sure that we put forth a mobile courtroom setup. I think access for inmates during COVID-19 to the trial courts has been horrendous. I think video conferencing equipment that's currently in place is outdated. It's antiquated. I think that we need to get a robust, bold vision. And I would make sure that we had a mobile courtroom available on site, and we'd bring our courthouses right to the House of Correction so that the inmates would have access to their access to justice, to have a fair hearing. It's not good enough to participate on Zoom or video conference. We need mobile courtrooms on site that the judge and the court staff can come, defense attorneys can come, and inmates can confront the witnesses and their accusers.
Thank you, Pat. Jerry, the same question.
Thank you so much. I've actually filed legislation along with my predecessor, Michael Bellotti, and the lead sponsor, State Representative Allison Sullivan, for video conferencing. We led the courts. The district courts were able to get back up and functioning because we went out during the global pandemic and sanitized with our staff, the district courts, the district attorney's office, all the police stations, as well as our own jail and house of correction. When COVID hit, we had a plan in place. We have plans in place for every critical incident, and we have emergency response plans. I was one of the first sheriffs to offer my officers additional hazard pay. We made sure that they had the PPE. I went to each housing unit and got buy-in from the people in our care and custody, and I personally bought them each their own bar of antibacterial soap, full-size bars of dial soap, and I explained what the virus means to those inmates. I've also got the blessing of working with a renowned epidemiologist, Dr. Wersell. I pulled together our environmental officers, our custody staff, mental health, behavioral health, and our medical team, and we formed what I first called the infectious disease response team. It's now called the pathogen response team. It is the first of its kind out of the 14 county sheriffs. We're going to work with the 28 boards of health, and that we'll be publishing our best practices so that we can help the entire community battle this global pandemic, because this won't be the last virus that hits us.
Thank you very much, Jerry. I will go to the next question, which comes from our Zoom audience. We'll start with you, Jerry. The question is, do you support the most recent legislation about police reform that has been going through the Massachusetts legislature? For example, do you support banning chokeholds or no-knock warrants? Do you believe in police certification systems? Why or why not? And if not, what would you propose instead?
There's a whole lot of questions in there, Vedna, and I'll do my best to hit them. So look, we need to raise the professional standards, period. We don't tolerate, we don't have chokeholds, number one. As far as qualified immunity, I'm opposed. I think that, you'll lose good men and women, and you'll have a problem recruiting people if you do away with qualified immunity. I support our law enforcement 110%. And that's why I've got the so many endorsements from the Mass Coalition of Police, Mass Municipal Police Association. Everyone who's watching this tonight, your police chief in your town has endorsed me. All 28 Norfolk County police chiefs have endorsed me. But look, I know that we can always do better. Like Coach Bill Belichick says about the Patriots, you can always improve the team. We need to raise professional standards. And Massachusetts is way ahead of many of the states across this country. But we can't rest on our laurels. We need to have some reforms. We need to make sure that everybody, particularly people of color, feel that they're getting a fair shake, that they're being treated equally and fairly. And sadly, across this country, some of the things that have happened have made my stomach churn. Well, when I saw George Floyd being murdered, and it was a murder, my daughters and I were crying. We watched that tape and we couldn't watch it anymore. We need to raise the bar. And my own staff, I can tell you this, they are the best of the best. We invest in training. We're going to continue to do that. We're going to continue to raise the bar and invest in our people because professional development is key.
Thank you very much, Jerry. The same question, Pat, do you want to repeat?
No, I'm all set. I just have to say that, I'm the brother of a Quincy police officer. My brother leaves his wife and 3 children every day, not sure if he's going to be coming home at night. And I'm honored to be his brother. I'm honored to also be friends with our good friends down in Weymouth, Chuck and Mimi Chestnut, who lost their son to a violent interaction with a perpetrator. But at the end of the day, we must reform issues that rise to police brutality. We got to get more innovative and expanded training for our corrections officers. I think my conversations with the corrections officers have led to the reason why both of the superior officers as well as the line officers have endorsed my candidacy, because we are going to offer better training in de-escalation. We're going to give them better equipment to make sure that they can confront any problems within the jail. But I believe in training and licensing for police. I believe in licensing and professional development should be a requirement. I am a believer in qualified immunity. Although that issue is kind of not an easy yes or no answer, it seems, because the legislature hasn't been able to formally decide which way they want to go on it. But I think that the police officers deserve that. I have that as a clerk magistrate. But when actions by police or anybody for that matter cross the line, we can't tolerate it, and offenders must be brought to justice as they have been. We need better training. We have civilians that are affected by this. So at the end of the day, we need to make sure that, that police reform and our correction officer training is put in place.
Thank you very much, Pat. I will go on to the next question. Let's see here. So we will start with you, Pat. Does the Sheriff's Department staff reflect the gender and ethnic diversity of the community it serves? If you feel improvements are needed, what steps would you take to improve this?
Well, the first thing that I'm going to do, as I mentioned before in many forums, is that my training in the trial court has been in diversity hiring and training. I served as president of the registers of probate and sat at the table with the court administrator and the chief justice of the trial court to make sure that diversity is of paramount importance to our workforce. So one of the first things I want to do is make sure that my human resource director at the sheriff's office will be basically a chief diversity officer that knows how to implement diversity amongst the administrative staff as well as our corrections officers to properly reflect the population in Norfolk County. We've been doing that successfully at the probate and family court. The diversity that we've been able to put in place has made us a better court, has made me a better manager. So I think that we need to do a better job, and I think that's systemically across the board in many areas. So it will be one of the first things that I do as a hire in my new administration as a chief diversity officer with a focus on human resources, training, and hiring for a diverse workforce.
Thank you very much, Pat. Jerry, the same question.
Thanks, Vedna. So as soon as I became the sheriff, it was probably my second or third risk management meeting where I had my leadership team in place. I reached out to a person of color and I pulled him aside. He's assistant deputy superintendent. And I said to him, look, it's not lost on me that there's not a lot of diversity here. And he said, no, then there hasn't been in quite some time. So I named him the chief diversity officer, and I've had him go out and cast a wide net with his team. Before the COVID pandemic hit, we were out at Curry College, Roxbury Community College, Massasoit. And as I mentioned earlier, the two classes of officers that I put on, the most diverse in probably 20 years, most people of color, 7 different languages spoken, and the most females. So we're going to continue that great forward-looking progress. Because anywhere that I've been, whether it's chief of staff at DCAM, which is the Division of Capital Asset Management and Maintenance, where I oversaw 370 employees, another complex organization that I have experience running, and running the jail and the House of Correction. Right now we have about 335 employees and close to 384 inmates today. Diversity and inclusion are key, but unlike my opponent, I have experience running these large, complex organizations. I think he may have managed a staff of 10 to 12 at the probate and registry court, and we can get into a little bit of his management history later. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Pat, do you care to rebut?
Well, I just say, when I was, as I said earlier, that I was president of the registers of probate, which gave me a seat at the table for the entire trial court. I served on many committees that orchestrated a major shift in the way that the trial court operations work in terms of hiring diverse officers. So we've got a robust human resource program at the trial court right now, and it's largely based upon the fact of my leadership going back for many years. I happen to create the diversity plan with the trial court officials, and then I implemented it in my local courthouse. So we've had success on it, and we'll continue to have success, and I'm sure my successor will have success because of the foundation that we put forth to make sure that our practices are focused on diversity.
Jerry, do you care to rebut? Okay.
No, not on that.
Thank you. I will move on to the next question, and this also comes from our live Zoom audience. And we will start with you, Jerry. What is the current policy for phone call charges, and what would you propose in terms of changes?
Great question. So let me just start when the global pandemic hit. Local calls are about 16 cents a minute. When the global pandemic hit, I immediately said, we're not going to have contact visits. And then I said, we're not going to have any visits at all for the safety of staff and inmates in our care and custody. We don't want that virus being brought in here. Now, you have to understand, when you take away the visits, that can cause the climate inside to go up because inmates look forward to seeing their mom or their girlfriend. So you don't want to have a climate issue. So what I did is I immediately said, we're going to allow 15 minutes, and then I bumped it up to 30 minutes, free phone calls for loved ones. We also gave out 3 stamped envelopes and writing materials so that people could write and correspond. But the free phone calls were key. Going forward, I'm doing away. I'll be the first sheriff. We're doing away with any local charges for phone calls because I think it's important for family reunification. You have to have that. I'm introducing tablets. Now, with the COVID-19, they're a little bit held up because they're coming in from China. But I'm partnering with a group called Securus. And on those tablets, not only can they get their high school and their college courses, they can also get free email back and forth with family members. And then as far as content goes, if they so desire, they can buy additional content, movies and what have you, after they do their core curriculum. But it's important to me that family reunification work. And a key piece of the phone calls really is that you listen in. Internal Affairs can pick up some intelligence by monitoring those calls.
Thank you very much, Jerry. Pat, same question.
So I believe, yeah, you do need to keep access to families as well as defense attorneys available for our inmate population. Having access to that is something that does keep the peace while the inmate is incarcerated. I would eliminate, however, any contract that charges inmates for phone calls. I think that's just an archaic form of funding any kind of budget that we have off the canteen account of an inmate. So that would be eliminated, and I think maybe the current sheriff is agreeable with that. I think we have to get into the 21st century. I think phone calls are great, but I think face-to-face is better. I think we have to unify with a secured environment to have face-to-face interaction. Zoom is getting a lot better, but we need to make sure that there is a secured line that's possibly recorded to make sure, yes, our internal affairs, that no exchange is taking place. You also do have to watch out for, you have to monitor any kind of face-to-face contact as well for any kind of unspoken signals that are being given from one party to another. But I think there's a lot of value to be putting forth face-to-face contact with an inmate and his loved ones to settle them down, to actually hopefully give them hope as they move forward in whatever programs that they're doing, so that possibly they can arrange the programs for outside of the jail as well upon their reentry. So that's important. I think it's an important thing that we offer our inmates is that.
Thank you very much, Pat. Do you care to rebut, Jerry? Or okay. Wonderful. We'll go on to the next question. So we will start with you, Pat. There is an increased awareness and concern about racial or implicit bias with regard to law enforcement. If elected, what measures would you implement to ensure all inmates are treated without bias?
So yeah, so I think, when it comes to racism and systemic racism, it really has been a 4-year track record since, in the United States, since the institution of slavery. So obviously it's been a systemic problem for hundreds of years here in this country. The recent outcry is a public outcry that racism remains pervasive in our society. It's in our education system, it's in our workforce, it's in our housing, and it's in our criminal justice system. So we can't talk about public safety issues if the public isn't feeling safe. So I look to have real, raw, and relevant conversations about racism. And as sheriff, I plan on working with the safety crisis, leading the charge to institute change wherever we need to do so. We need to seek out and focus on the perspectives of diverse ethnic communities and immigrant populations across Norfolk County when we develop our policies and programming in the sheriff's office. My background is reaching out to diverse populations. I've been blessed to be a member of the Rotary Club International, where we have ongoing meetings with diverse cultures from around the world. And right here in Norfolk County, we are a microcosm of ethnic diversity. We need to make sure as sheriff, we reach out to all those communities, have those real, raw, relevant conversations, and put those into perspective when we create our programming for our inmates.
Thank you very much, Pat. Jerry, same question.
Vedna, could you just repeat the beginning of that, please?
Absolutely. There is an increased awareness and concern about racial or implicit bias with regard to law enforcement. If elected, what measure would you implement to ensure all inmates are treated without bias?
Great, thanks, Vedna. So we do already measure, and we have a command staff meeting to make sure that everyone is being treated fairly. And again, transparency is the best disinfectant of sunlight. But we meet to make sure that anybody, particularly if they've been put into segregated housing, any disciplinary action that's taken, we're looking to measure: are we treating every inmate fairly? And is it because of he or she's mental health status? Is it because they're perhaps a person of color? So you have to measure these things. What you measure, then you can get some good results from. As far as implicit bias training, I've already reached out to the ADL. We're just waiting because of COVID-19. We couldn't have Robert Trussman in when we wanted to, but we are planning implicit bias training for all of our staff. I have a zero tolerance policy for racism. And actually, I just discharged a couple of employees from the Civil Process Office after an investigation because I will not stand for it. Zero tolerance. And I've gone around and personally talked to corrections officers and let them know that the change that I'm implementing is that they're not going to say anything derogatory about the inmates in our care and custody. And sadly, some of the worst actors, some of the officers with the worst disciplinary records, are the core supporters of my opponent. And it gives me great pause because I fear that if he were ever to become sheriff, he would empower the very people that have treated the inmates so poorly.
Thank you very much, Jerry. Do you care to rebut, Pat?
Sadly, I do. I mean, unfortunately, to hold your own employees in such contempt is, I think, the reason why overwhelmingly, not just a few have endorsed my candidacy, but overwhelmingly, corrections officers, supervisors union, the ad tech union, which makes up our non-uniformed officers, have overwhelmingly endorsed my candidacy for sheriff. It's largely based on a lack of leadership that's going on at the jail right now. Sounds like a lot of lollipops and rainbows going on, but I'll tell you something right now. The stories I hear are horrific. Lack of communication, lack of training, lack of respect from the administration for these members of this group. So I'm honored to carry their endorsement into this campaign, and I look forward to leading them as my colleagues in making sure that criminal justice is reformed and public safety is of paramount importance to the people in Norfolk County.
Okay. Jerry, I'll give you a chance to rebut up to 1 minute. And I'm just reminding both of you, just in terms of civility, this is a debate. I'm sorry, this is a forum, not a debate. And to stick to the facts as relative to your understanding. Okay, Jerry.
Absolutely, Vedna. And it should stay on a positive and high note and not a debacle like the presidential debate. Many of the officers that are up there supported my challengers, two primary opponents, Jim Coughlin and Bill Phelan, two very decent men. It speaks volumes that neither Bill Phelan nor Jim Coughlin, the Democratic runner-ups, are with the Democratic nominee, nor are the officers that were supporting the Phelan or Coughlin camp. They're with me. There was a core group of people that had promised my opponent the endorsement long before I was ever appointed by Governor Charlie Baker. Now, I'm out there championing professional training for our men and women, regardless of who they endorsed. I'm the one who's up at the State House lobbying for pay parity so that county officers get paid the same as Department of Corrections officers. I've treated them with nothing but respect, and I have their respect. And when the global pandemic hit, I made sure that our officers were well looked after, and I probably spent about $2,000 out of my own pocket making sure I got them special meals to keep morale up during this global pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jerry. I'm going to go to the next question. We'll start with you, Jerry, for this next question. Should the federal agency known as ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, be in Norfolk County House of Correction? Why or why not?
The simple answer is no. My predecessor had a longstanding practice that he didn't take ICE detainees, and neither do I. My opponent questioned me on the U.S. Marshal detainees. We're not making money off of them. I mean, we might get paid around $107 per inmate per day, but it's not a money-making venture when you're looking at maybe 60 U.S. Marshal detainees right now out of a population of 384 folks in custody. So that's not the reason at all. But Many of the ICE issues are issues that they're not black and white. They're quite gray. I know as a son of Irish immigrants growing up that many of the people that ICE go after are here working in this country. There might be Italian immigrants or Irish immigrants or what have you. They've got businesses, they've got families, they've been here for a long time. ICE can deal with their own business, but I'm not going to be a part of detaining people for them. We will certainly work with all levels, as we swear an oath to, any federal, state, local agency we will work with, but we're not taking ICE detainees up at the House of Correction. We're focused on the people in our care and custody at the county level that come to us from the district courts and giving them the kinds of programs that they need. We don't need to get sidetracked with ICE detainees. And actually, Sheriff Steve Tompkins was holding them in Boston for some period of time, and he did away with the practice. So no, we won't have ICE detainees while I'm sheriff.
Thank you very much, Jerry. Pat, the same question.
So there's always common ground. So I absolutely will not ever take ICE detainees as the future sheriff. My responsibility is to ensure that all the residents of our county feel safe and secure. And partnering with ICE to round up immigrants only makes it less safe for these communities to reach out to the sheriff's office and local law enforcement when they need help, which in turn perpetuates more crime and makes Norfolk County less safe. So a new approach for public safety can't involve going back to old, outdated, and ineffective ways of policing. We can't return to a day when undocumented immigrants are hiding in the shadows, afraid of engaging in the community. You can't be a leader in public safety when the public doesn't feel safe, and that includes our immigrant populations.
Thank you very much, Pat. And we will go to our closing statements. We will finish with a 90-second closing statements in reverse ballot order, starting with Pat.
Great. I want to thank the League of Women Voters. I want to thank Jerry McDermott for this forum tonight. Lasting change requires us to raise our standards. We need a leader with firm resolution to compel those changes. You need a leader willing to actively engage, listen, and coordinate and develop an action plan. As I said before, prevention, intervention, education, and hope. Those are the keys to a safer, stronger Norfolk County. We have an opportunity to envision a new role for the Norfolk County Sheriff as the new role of expansion of public safety. And we need to have a changing our understanding of what public safety means. It's more than putting criminals in jail. It has to be, and we all know it. Public safety means creating an environment where everyone in a community is safe to live, to grow, and to thrive. And whether it's the COVID-19 epidemic or our opioid crisis and the influx of crime associated with it, the Sheriff's Office can and should be a part of the answer, leading the county in coordinating responses across all 28 communities. So I want to thank the League of Women Voters for giving me the opportunity to share my vision with you tonight, an expansive role of the sheriff in public safety. If you want to learn more about me, you can check out www.patrickmcdermott.org or my Facebook page. And with your help, we can create a safer, more secure Norfolk County for everyone. I humbly ask for your vote on November 3rd. Patrick McDermott. Pick Pat.
Thank you, Pat. Jerry, your closing statement. You have 90 minutes. You have 90 seconds.
Well, Bednar, I thought you said 90 minutes, and I'll take it. Look, I want to thank everybody, including my opponent, Pat, who I affectionately call cousin, although we're not related. And Bednar, thank you, and you've done a great job in the League of Women Voters. Since I've been sheriff the last 22 months, we have made great progress, and I like to call it a reformer with results. I get up energized every day to go to work and to perform the duties that have been bestowed upon me as your sheriff. We have launched a brand new task force on juvenile mental health and substance use disorder. We have ended the unfair practice, the unequal practice of having women sent to MCI Framingham. I've got a new program for our females involved with the justice system so that eventually no woman at the county level will be behind bars. That's just brutal, especially for the moms. We have made substantial gains with regard to our budget. Again, I inherited close to $6 million in red ink, but yet we ended last fiscal year in the black. I've expanded diversity hiring with the last 2 classes of officers, and not just in the corrections officer's position, but also in the administration. There's been more diversity in 22 months than, frankly, there's been in almost 20 years up at the House of Correction. So all this forward-looking progress and the reforms that have been implemented. I'd like to have a chance to do that again. So I'm asking for your vote respectfully. Vote to keep Sheriff Jerry at the jail. And if you'd like to find out more, www.sheriffjerrymcdermott.com. Thank you very much and stay safe.
Thank you. Thank you. A big thank you to you, the candidates, for your willingness to participate in our forum. We wish you both good luck with the election. And thank you to our Zoom and live stream audiences. A recording of this forum will be available on stoughtontv.com and the League of Women Voters websites. The election is November 3rd. The deadline to register for this election is October 24th. In addition to in-person voting on Election Day, vote-by-mail ballots may be requested through October 28th, but we suggest you request earlier and must be postmarked no later than November 3rd and received no later than November 6th. And an in-person early voting is October 17th to October 30th. Please visit the Massachusetts Secretary of the Commonwealth's website for more details. The League of Women Voters Comprehensive Voter Guide can be found online at www.vote411.org. And this includes information on all the offices and will include complete candidate responses to questions in mid-October. The leagues in Norfolk County thanks Stoughton Media Access Corps for streaming the forum and the League of Women Voters of Massachusetts for the use of its Zoom account. Thank you again for joining us, and please remember to vote on or before November 3rd. Have a good evening.